Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. Amma ba'du, fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fis silmi kaffatan wa la tattabi'u khutuwatish shaitan innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. Sadaqallahul azim. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad وبارك وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. That Islam is a complete way of life is something that all Muslims know, acknowledge and appreciate. In practice, however, there are huge sections of our Deen which we have neglected. And this includes huge dimensions of family life and the detail of that. And we're not speaking here of, opinion or areas in which there may be differences of opinion, areas which are relating to fine detail. We're talking about core issues here. The Quran speaks succinctly about so many aspects of marriage and family life and the rights of kith and kin and the parameters of those rights and inheritance, financial obligations. Throughout the whole Quran you find detailed references, detailed instructions and guidelines in Surah Baqarah, in Surah Nisa, in Surah Tahrim, in Surah Talaq, in Surah Ma'idah, in so many different parts of the Quran. And much of what we see today in terms of the problems of family life is a direct consequence of the total abandonment of those entire sections of the Quran in terms of practicing. So where do we start from? Where do we go? Let us look at a few case studies. Let's take, for example, the whole issue of forced marriage. If I put on the hat of the parents, so to speak, the parental position, then it will be a case of the fact that as parents we understand what may be better for our children and we give them advice based on their best interest. And as such, as parents, surely our children owe it to us that they listen to us and take our advice. Yes, there's something in that. Except that, are we really thinking about their best interest? If it's about marrying our children into the family, that's perfectly permissible in Islam. It is permissible to marry into the family, into the clan, into the extended family. But this is only wise when the two are an appropriate match. The concept of kuf and being appropriate partners. Now, in principle, you would think that if two people are from the same extended family, they would be kuf for each other. They would have a similar family background and their lineage joins together, so they should be equal partners in that sense. Very similar social background, very similar background in terms of upbringing. But when you have generations of family that have been living apart because of migration, and then there are differences in education, then rather than converging, the value systems and mindset of such young people can diverge completely. So if, for example, the rest of your family or relatives or the relevant person, the potential partner, is in a different country, in your home country, and you are first, second, third generation migrants here, then although in bloodlines they will be very close together, and as such, if they had lived in the same region, they would have been compatible with each other. Compatibility. That was the word I was looking for a minute earlier. But now what's happened is their lives have converged, have not converged, have diverged, have moved apart so much that they have a different taste entirely in food, in culture, in social norms, in language and the use of it. This doesn't mean that such partnerships can't be established and such marriages can't be successful. They often are. But it does mean that parents should be more considerate about the possibilities and the outcomes. And the consequence of this is that when parents fail to do this, and there is pressure on young people to marry into such a situation, and then they don't get on, then this also affects relatives and relationships, sometimes between uncles and aunties and brothers and sisters. So the parents, one of the children's paternal, maternal uncles and aunties, their child is offered to them, a cousin, in marriage, and they comply because they want to oblige, they want to do as their parents say, and then it doesn't work out. So this was from the parental position. We were saying that it's perfectly understandable that you have the best interest of your children in mind, although the important thing in today's world is that parents often start this conversation with their young people far too late. It should start in their teens. And it should not be, but we should not get to a situation where young people are losing all their youth because they're waiting in the waiting game, and then when they choose a partner of their own because the parents haven't assisted them, then the parents are very disappointed with their children because they feel let down. So we don't need to get to this situation if we have an open bilateral two-way conversation with young people, treating them as intelligent young people, as adults. So this is wearing the parental hat. That fine, that can be understood, but it should be for the right reasons. If it's just because you want to appease your own brother or sister and you're not thinking enough about the children's needs and their compatibility, this can lead to problems. Let's look from the young person's side now. Now the young person situation, when a young person agrees to marry because of the parental wish, because of parental pressure, or just to oblige, it now becomes a responsibility on that young person. If you're that young person, it's now your responsibility to give everything to that marriage and make it work. Because what happens is sometimes you marry, a young person marries a relative or someone who's chosen by the parents to oblige, but then they don't realize the responsibility has come onto their shoulders. So by all means, take the blessing of your parents and have an agreement, be on the same page, but once you've gone into that marriage, either don't say yes in the first place and resist that pressure, whatever happens, take the storm on the chin, on the chest, or if you're going to go ahead and you're going to accept that proposal, then you need to live by it. The Quran says, وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا لِتَعْتَدُوا. This is in Surah Baqarah, towards the end of the second juz. And this is about when a man gives his wife a talaq raj'i once, twice, and then he doesn't let her go. He does ruju each time, and he keeps her in the marriage just to torment her. And the Quran is saying, وَلَا تُمْسِكُنَّ, don't hold them back in the marriage, ضِرَارًا, to cause them harm, to cause them suffering, لِتَعْتَدُوا, that you transgress. So the Quran is explicitly prohibiting keeping your partner in her marriage, in the marriage, just so you can cause her suffering. Now, how does this apply to how can we use this metaphor? This is when two are not getting on. Let's take the example. A young local lad is taken back home and he marries to comply with his parents' wishes. And his wife, his new bride, she's brought home. Now he abandons her in the house. So now she does her best to please the extended family. She'll do chores for them, which isn't really her responsibility to take an unfair share and burden of the housework. She has her brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. They're not her primary responsibility at all. This is a favor from her. So the whole extended family. So she is essentially now working like a maid in the house. And as for her husband, he doesn't click with her. He doesn't make an attempt to. So he's out in the evening socializing with his friends, and he's holding her in the marriage because he doesn't want to disappoint his parents. He is very, very sinful as a consequence. He's equally responsible. His parents are responsible, he's responsible. Why did they force him to marry someone he wouldn't get on with? And why did he comply? And now why is he now abandoning her? Now that he's taken that decision, it's his responsibility to give her honor and dignity in the first instance, and to invest in this marriage. Remember, you can have some type of positive relationship in many a situation. There may be situations where this isn't possible. This is an example, an explicit example of an open negation or open opposition to an explicit teaching in the Quran, where people are kept in marriage and they're caused to suffer. Sometimes a husband is abusive to his wife, but he won't divorce her either. So Islamically, she can't move on. A similar example. Another example is with reference to the mahr. The Quran says, وَإِنْ آتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا فَلَا تَأْخُذُوا مِنْهُ شَيْئًا أَتَأْخُذُونَهُ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. This is towards the end of Surah An-Nisa. If you have given your wife a hoard of treasure, a mountain of gold, qintar is a huge treasure, a huge fortune, as mahr, then it's hers for keeps after the consummation of the marriage. And the Quran is saying that if you divorce her now, then you can't take anything back from it. أَتَأْخُذُونَ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. Do you take it as an open sin, as a big sin, and an open buhtan, an accusation? The Quran is rejecting your demand on that wealth. And this is fascinating. The honor of a woman. We have seen nikahs in which the mahr was £1 million. We have seen nikahs in which the mahr was $500,000. In the Arab communities at least, a big mahr is still a tradition. And the Quran is saying, if you've given that, in the Asian communities sometimes, the jewelry, a gift of gold, jewelry is given, golden jewelry is given as part of the mahr. So let's suppose that you give your wife a gift of jewelry as part of the mahr. Now, let's suppose the marriage fails. Now you want it back. It's not allowed in Islam. You can't take a penny of it. It's actually haram for you to take it back. If you haven't given it, she's still entitled to it even after consummation, even after a single night. If there's a breakdown after the honeymoon, it still has to be her property. And it's a debt on his head if he doesn't give it. And the Quran is very clear about this, very explicit. It's her entitlement. And since we mentioned gifts, the same applies here. If there's a separation, a divorce, it doesn't mean that partners can take gifts back. They're not entitled to that. In fact, a person who takes a gift back is actually described, and this is a severe situation. This is why the example is such. A dog that vomits and then licks its own vomit. This is the metaphor of a person who takes a hadiyah back. And this is for any person. And the intimate relationship between husband and wife, how can a person demand the hadiyah back because they've had a tiff, a disagreement? So these are just some examples. We could go through case study after case study. The actual point I started with was that we've neglected and abandoned huge sections of the Quranic teaching. And these sections, these details are open in the Quran. They're not. Let's take another one, since we're on the theme of family life. Time? How much time?
120.
Another example is custody rights. حق الحضانة. The Quran says, لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده. Neither a father should be harmed through his child, nor a mother. And what this means, this also means, is this is talking about the weaning and breastfeeding. Actually, the first right to breastfeed is that of the mother, should she wish to. Otherwise, it's the father's responsibility to make arrangements as appropriate. This is openly detailed in the Quran. Now, the Quran talks about mashwara between the mother and father, even after separation. أَن تَرَاضٍ مِّنْهُمَا وَتَشَاوُرٍ أَن تَرَاشَاوٍ مِّنْهُمَا وَتَرَاضٍ. If they disagree on other issues, then even so, they should be doing mashwara about the weaning of the child. So basically, what shouldn't be happening is that if there's a separation and a divorce, the child there's a tug of war that ensues, and each one is fighting for custody rights, and the mother wants to punish the father by depriving him of seeing the child, and the father wants to punish the mother by depriving her of seeing the child, and the child is being made to believe falsehoods about the parent. Stories are being told to give the picture that this particular parent is a very evil person. Now, what should actually happen is both parents should have so much compassion for the child that their mutual disagreements should not lead them to turning the child against the parent. They should each understand that the father and the mother and the father, each has a contribution to make. There may be situations in which there may be particular reasons why an abusive parent, for example, cannot be allowed to be alone with the child or to meet the child. Those are exceptions. We're talking about the normal situation where people make false allegations upon their spouses because they want for vengeance, because they want to get their own back. So this shouldn't be happening according to the Quran. And yes, the initial stages, and there's detail of this in the Sharia, about the fact that there's a period of time in which the mother is the infant and the young child needs more time with the mother, and then later on there's more rights for the father as well. This is all detailed in fiqh. But the point is, these questions don't even arise. One tires, one becomes weary of the number of situations we see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, year after year, in which people will issue a divorce. I'll give you a typical situation. I've mentioned this in talks before, but you have a situation where someone contacts the masjid and you pick up the phone and it's an inquiry about a divorce, and we're told that this person, he said the words of talaq to his wife, but he said it in anger. And this is used as a basis to suggest that it shouldn't have happened because it was done in anger, in a fit of anger. Subhanallah. This doesn't make rational sense either, and it's not the case in the Sharia that a divorce given in anger isn't a divorce. Think about it. What do people do when they are angry? When people are angry, a person may say something abusive to another person. Does it justify abusive comments, being angry? Even worse, if a person becomes physically aggressive towards another person and strikes them, attacks them because they are angry, does this justify that? Is this a defense? That because you were angry, you'll be told that you should learn to control your anger and not be oppressive in that situation. No court of law will accept, unless someone pleads insanity, and that's established medically. There may be a reduced responsibility in that situation. Otherwise, if a person, any sane and sober talking about sobriety, I'll take that back. Any sane person, a person is drunk, they're still responsible for a crime they commit. That's why drink driving is an offence, and it's like that in every law. Being drunk and intoxicated is not justification for committing a crime. It's not a justification. There's a double responsibility. Why did you get yourself into that state and then take that upon you? Why did you allow yourself to be in that situation? So in the case of driving, why did you put yourself behind the seat? So if a person is abusive because they're drunk, it doesn't give them justification. So here too, anger is not a justification. And then people are surprised, really? Does the intimate relationship of wedlock break with a single word? Well, we ask the same question. A person comes into Iman with a single word, the kalima. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu Rasulullah. A few seconds and the person is a mu'min. Hitherto he wasn't, now he's embraced the faith. What about the nikah? It's a simple qabiltuha, I've accepted her. It's a simple acceptance, word of acceptance, offer and acceptance. Have you given yourself? Yeah. Have you accepted? Yes. In front of witnesses with the conditions. So the nikah happened with a single word. Was that not surprising? Wedlock was established with a single word. So the talaq too happens with a single word. If you drop the crystal glass onto the floor and it shatters, there's no point in discussing whether you dropped it by accident or on purpose. If somebody was to be playing with a loaded arm, a loaded pistol, and they were to release the trigger, no safety catch, and somebody was to suffer as a consequence, this wouldn't be a defense. Why were you playing with something so dangerous? You can't bring back what's lost. So we need to understand the responsibility in relationships. But we've used this as an example. Actually, the reality is that we can talk about other branches of life as well, other aspects. This is with giving and taking of loans and how they are documented and how the promises should be fulfilled. It's about neighbours and it's about relatives, it's about greetings, it's about forgiveness and how to forgive each other. It's about how to resolve issues. It's about when a third party should, subhanAllah, in marriage and outside of marriage. The Quran in Surah Hujurat, with marriage, Allah Ta'ala talks about mediation. So there should be a mediator on behalf of each of the two. إِن يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. If the two want rectification of the problem, Allah Ta'ala will put muwafaqa, an agreement between them. There's two tafsirs of this. One means that if the husband and wife are both sincere and they want to resolve the issue, then the two mediators will be guided and they will be assisted in that. And the other interpretation is if the two mediators are sincere. There's supposed to be two mediators, one on behalf of the wife, one on behalf of the husband, according to the Quran. In Surah Hujurat, Allah Ta'ala talks about two groups who are disagreeing and disagreement. We have a culture in amongst our midst of a gangster culture, in which sometimes the desire for vengeance lies in people's hearts for years, and then on the first opportunity somebody is attacked and they're taken down, unfortunately. And we see very sad examples of this, where these rivalries, gang rivalries, they can sort of fester inside people's bosoms, inside people's hearts for months, years, and then on the first opportunity somebody is attacked and somebody is assaulted and somebody can lose their life. So these types of situations, subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned one hadith, and I think I close with this, that al-qatil wal-maqtul, the killer and the killed, are both in Jahannam, both in the fire of hell. And the Sahaba asked, Ya Rasulullah, we understand why the killer would go to hell. What about the killed person? And the Prophet explains that he too was desirous of killing his companion, his brother. So when two people are having a fight, and one of them is able to strike the other one down first, it doesn't mean that the other one is not culpable. If he too was fighting back, if they were both fighting each other and both had the wrong intention. Remember the first murder, Habil and Qabil? So what did Habil say? He says, if you're going to stretch out your hand to kill me, I'm not going to stretch my hand out to kill you. I don't want to take, I want you to be responsible for this sin, and you on the day of Qiyamah, my sins will be on your shoulders rather than the other way around. So these types of disagreements, so it doesn't take much. Reading the Quran, there are two types of verses in the Quran. There are those which need detailed explanation, and there are those from which benefit can be taken directly, because there are much simpler points of wisdom. There are both aspects of the Quranic verses. And so let's look at this, and I finish with this. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً. Remember the ni'mah of Allah upon you when you were enemies amongst yourself. فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَةِ إِخْوَانًا. Allah Ta'ala, through His favour, He made you into brothers. These verses were revealed to the Sahaba, to the Ansar, Aus and Khazraj. Remember the Jahili period when you didn't get on and Islam came and you became brethren. Allah Ta'ala reminds this ummah to remember the ni'mah of the fraternity of Iman. So to finish with what I started with, we need to turn back to the teachings of Deen. We need to turn back to the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah, and we need to embrace that, so that we are true to the word that Islam is a complete way of faith, it's a way of life. It is, but we too should be complete Muslims. May Allah grant us tawfiq. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. ये बात तो हर मुसलमान समझता है कि इस्लाम में हर चीज़ का अदब सिखाया गया. इस्लाम का निज़ाम एक कामिल निज़ाम है. ज़िंदगी के हर शोबे से मुताल्लिक़ इसमें हमें तालीमात और अहकाम दिए गए, आदाब सिखाए गए. मगर अफसोस की बात है कि आज हम कुरान से एराज़ कर रहे हैं, हदीस से एराज़ कर रहे हैं. दीन से हमने अपना मुंह फेर लिया, और जिन मसाइल से इनफिरादी तौर पर और इज्तिमाई तौर पर हम दोचार हैं, वो इसी का नतीजा है कि हमने कुरान को छोड़ दिया, उसके अहकाम को हमने छोड़ दिया. हमारा इन्हितात, हमारी पस्ती इसी का नतीजा है. चाहे उसका ताल्लुक़ अक़ाइद से हो, आमाल से हो, معاشرت سے ہو، معاملات سے ہو، اخلاقیات سے ہو، یہ سارے شعبے قرآن اور حدیث میں موجود ہیں، ہماری شریعت میں موجود ہیں۔ ایک گھر کے اندر جو مسائل پیدا ہوتے ہیں ان کا حل بھی قرآن کریم کے اندر موجود ہے، لیکن حال یہ ہے کہ قرآن کریم کے احکام کی سری مخالفت ہو رہی ہے، اس کی طرف التفات ہی نہیں، ہمیں معلوم ہی نہیں، معلوم کرنے کا جذبہ، اس کی تکلیف برداشت کرنے کے لیے ہم تیار نہیں ہیں۔ ہم اتنے مصروف ہیں کہ اپنی دنیاوی ضروریات کے لیے ہم ہر کوشش کرنے کے لیے تیار ہیں۔ انسان بڑی عمر میں بھی، کتنے لوگ ایسے ہیں کہ کسی نئے شعبے میں انہوں نے جب وہ نوکری شروع کرتے ہیں تو ان کو امتحان دینے پڑتی ہیں، ٹریننگ حاصل کرنی پڑتی ہے، پرچے امتحان گاہ میں جانا پڑتا ہے۔ کتنے شعبے ایسے ہیں، CPD کنٹینیول پروفیشنل ڈیولپمنٹ، بڑی عمر میں مسلسل امتحان دینے پڑتے ہیں، سیکھنا پڑتا ہے، کتابیں پڑھنی پڑتی ہیں، مطالعہ کرنا پڑتا ہے، ٹریننگ سیشنز میں، کلاس میں جانا پڑتا ہے، اور یہ ساری عمر کا معمول ہے۔ کتنے شعبے ایسے ہیں، تو اس کے لیے تو ہم تیار ہیں۔ کتنے لوگ ایسے ہیں کہ نوکری حاصل کرنے کے لیے نیا کوالیفیکیشن، نیا ڈپلومہ، نئی ٹریننگ، تاکہ CV میں کچھ اضافی بات لکھ سکیں، انٹرویو میں بتا سکیں کہ ہم نے یہ شرط بھی آپ کی پوری کر دی ہے، لائف لانگ لرننگ۔ لیکن جب دین کا مسئلہ آتا ہے تو اس کے لیے ہم تیار نہیں ہیں، اس کا اہتمام کرنے کے لیے ہم تیار نہیں ہیں۔ بس میں ایک سادی سی بات سے اس بات کو ختم کرتا ہوں، اس لیے کہ وقت مختصر ہے، اور وہ یہ ہے کہ ہمیں یہ معلوم ہونا چاہیے ہر مسلمان کو کہ زندگی کے جس شعبے میں ہم قدم رکھتے ہیں اس شعبے سے متعلق احکام کا جاننا ہمارے ذمے واجب ہو جاتا ہے۔ اس کی مثال ایسے ہے کہ بالغ ہونے پر بچے کے ذمے، ماں باپ کے ذمے تو بلوغ سے پہلے بچوں کو نماز کا عادی بنانا ہے، نماز کے مسائل سکھانا ہے، اور بچہ جب بالغ ہو جاتا ہے تو اب تو اس پر نماز فرض ہو چکی ہے، تو اس سے پہلے اس کو اس کے احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے تاکہ وہ نماز پڑھ سکے۔ تو اعلیٰ ھذا القیاس، اسی ترتیب پر زندگی کا ہر شعبہ ہے۔ جب انسان نکاح کی زندگی میں، ازدواجی زندگی میں قدم رکھتا ہے تو اس میں قدم رکھنے سے پہلے اس کو نکاح کے احکام اور معاشرت کے احکام، حلال و حرام معلوم ہونا چاہیے، اور اس کے بعد پھر جب وہ باپ بنتا ہے، ماں بنتی ہے، تو والدین کی جو ذمہ داریاں ہیں اس کا مطالعہ ہونا چاہیے، وہ احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے۔ بچے کی ولادت کے موقع پر بچے کے حقوق، بڑی عمر تک، جب تک وہ بالغ نہیں ہو جاتا تو اس کی تربیت نہیں ہو جاتی، اس کی تعلیم نہیں ہو جاتی۔ اگر نکاح میں مسائل پیدا ہو رہے ہیں ازدواجی زندگی میں تو احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے۔ خدا نخواستہ اگر طلاق تک نوبت پہنچتی ہے تو طلاق دینے کا بھی جائز اور ناجائز طریقہ ہے، دونوں صورتوں میں ہو جائے گی، لیکن ایک جائز طریقہ ہے، ایک ناجائز طریقہ ہے۔ اسی طریقے پر اگر ہم تجارت اور ملازمت کے اور اس شعبے میں قدم رکھتے ہیں تو تجارت کرنے کے کچھ احکام ہیں، تجارت کے کچھ طریقے حلال ہیں، کچھ حرام ہیں، لین دین کے کچھ طریقے حلال اور جائز ہیں، کچھ حرام ہیں اور ممنوع ہیں۔ اسی طرح اگر ہم کسی کی ملازمت کرتے ہیں یا کوئی ہماری کرتا ہے تو اس وقت دونوں کے درمیان کیا عقد ہونا چاہیے اور اس کو کیسے بجا لانا ہے، دونوں کے کیا حقوق ہیں۔ کسی چیز کو دکان سے خریدنا ہے، اس کے احکام ہیں، بیع و شراء کے احکام ہیں، معلوم ہونے چاہیے۔ انسان مسافر بنتا ہے، سفر کے احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے، مسافر کے احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے۔ اگر اللہ تعالیٰ ہمیں دولت دیتا ہے تو زکوٰۃ کے احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے، فطرانہ کے احکام معلوم ہونے چاہیے، اضحیہ اور قربانی کے احکام۔ حج پہ چلتے ہیں، عمرہ پہ چلتے ہیں، اس سفر میں اللہ تعالیٰ حرمین کی حفاظت فرمائے اور آباد فرمائے، پہلے سے زیادہ آباد فرمائے، تو حج کے مسائل جاننا ضروری ہے۔ روزہ رمضان آتا ہے تو زندگی کے جتنے بھی شعبے ہیں ان شعبوں سے متعلق ضروری معلومات حاصل کرنا ہر انسان کا فرض ہے، اور ہم ایسے نہیں کریں گے تو ایک تو ہم اس غفلت کی وجہ سے گنہگار ہیں، پھر وہ موقع بھی چھوٹ جائے گا۔ جب وہ زندگی کا مرحلہ گزر گیا، اس میں عمل نہیں کیا تو ہم محروم رہ گئے کہ اسلام کے اس مبارک پہلو پر عمل کرنے کا موقع ہمیں ملا، ہم نے اس پر عمل نہیں کیا۔ اسلاف تو اس کی کوشش کرتے تھے کہ قرآن کے ایک ایک حکم پر عمل کرنے کی توفیق مل جائے، اس کی سعادت مندی۔ اس بات پر میں ختم کرتا ہوں، جب ہمارے ہاں کوئی صدمہ پہنچے، مثال کے طور پر والدین کا انتقال ہو جائے، ان دونوں میں سے کسی ایک کا، یا شوہر میاں بیوی میں سے دونوں میں سے کسی ایک کا انتقال ہو جائے، یا اولاد میں سے کسی کا انتقال ہو جائے، یا رشتہ داروں میں سے، تو اس وقت رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی زندگی میں جتنے صدمے پہنچے ہیں ان کو یاد کرنا چاہیے کہ آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے حضرت خدیجہ الکبریٰ رضی اللہ عنہ کی وفات کو یاد کریں، قاسم اور ابراہیم رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے فرزند، ان کی وفات کو یاد کریں، حضرت حمزہ رضی اللہ عنہ کی شہادت کو یاد کریں، حضور صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کی بیٹیاں، ان کی وفات اور یہ صدمہ، اس کو یاد کریں، تو حضور صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے کتنے لاڈلے صحابہ، کتنی تعداد میں کن کن موقعوں پر ان کی شہادتیں ہوئی ہیں، تو یہ اس موقع پر ہم اس اسوہ کو اس کے ساتھ اس کو سینے سے لگائیں کہ آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم ان مراحل سے گزرے ہیں، ہم تجارت کریں اس وقت، ہم سفر کریں اس وقت، تو یہ تو موقع ہیں، جب وہ چھوٹ جائیں گے تو ثواب کی بات تو بعد میں. مومن جو اللہ رسول کا عاشق ہو تو اس کے لیے تو اس کا تو یہ جذبہ ہونا چاہیے کہ بس اے اللہ مجھے ان مراحل سے سنت کے مطابق گزار دے، یہی اجر کے طور پر کافی ہے، یعنی اعزاز کے طور پر کافی ہے. اوپر سے اگر تو اس عمل کو قبول کرتا ہے اور اس میں کوتاہی معاف کر دیتا ہے تو یہ تیرے طرف سے ایکسٹرا بونس ہے، یہ تو تیری طرف سے فضل ہے. تو یہ کہ اگر ہم جوانی بھی گزار دیں اور بڑی عمر بھی گزار دیں اور دین کے ہر شعبے میں ہم کوتاہی کرتے رہیں تو ہم سے زیادہ محروم کون ہو سکتا ہے کہ زندگی میں آئے، اس جہاں میں سانس بھی لیا لیکن شریعت کے کسی عمل پر، کسی حکم پر عمل بھی نہ کیا. اللہ تعالی ہمیں توفیق عطا فرمائے، نیک توفیق عطا فرمائے. وآخر دعوانا الحمد للہ رب العالمین وصلی اللہ تعالی علی خیر خلقی سیدنا محمد وآلہ وصحبہ اجمعین.